All of my channels based around Catholicism. I went deep down like the rabbit hole when I was a teenager and now debate. I was listening to some stream and you'd mentioned a Catholic background, and I've always been hunting for guests with a Catholic background. So tell me a little bit about what Catholicism looked like for you growing up and how that sort of influenced you in your formative years.
Sure, I'm more than happy to do that. For my stream, do you mind introducing yourself?
My name is Cade Bradley. I run a main YouTube channel doing video essays and then a second podcast channel doing a number of discussions and debates with people who are still very Catholic and then people who have deconstructed and are experts in philosophy or science or whatever. I think I've been posting for like a yearish now. Got into the Jubilee debates with Jordan Peterson and with Michael Knowles. There was two other ones that were supposed to come out this year that got moved for some things that are happening in politics, but the bulk of my work is on YouTube and apart from Jubilee. For my actual like story of a background, I was raised in middle of the road Catholic family. As a teenager, went deep down the radical Catholic rabbit hole, was going to the Latin Mass, discerned to become a Catholic priest, ended off going off to a very conservative Catholic college to get my degrees in theology and philosophy, and then about 3 years deconstructing and realized we didn't really have good belief or good reason to believe in particular things. And then about a year ago, I was like, well, I should yap about this on the internet because there's very few like ex-Catholic channels. I've done a number of things under the sun, but that's sort of the short version of my own background.
Great. So, what do you identify as now? Atheist?
Yeah, I use the term atheist in titles and thumbnails and discussions just to sort of simplify things. My actual position would be igtheist, which is to say that the words and ideas that we use about God are so complicated and unclear that we can't make knowledge claims about God. So I don't say that, like, I know if there is a God or not, but I say I am pretty confident that there are no good reasons, at least that I've found, for me to believe in a God, and thus I sort of suppose that there is not a God. Even though, sure, could God be tricking all of us? Sure. What's the reasonable thing, I think, is not being dogmatic in one's philosophy.
Cool, I appreciate it. So I guess it's my turn. I'll go ahead and talk about my background in Catholicism. So I grew up Catholic. I live in Ohio where a lot of Germans immigrated. My grandpa came here from Germany and he had kids here. Those kids were Catholic, and so I was raised Catholic as well. My dad was raised and grew up Catholic. My mom is more of from a hillbilly background, so she's more Protestant, or she was at least, and then she married my dad and became Catholic. So I grew up Catholic. I was a Catholic the majority of my life. It just made sense to me. God was everything, like he was always watching. There was always like a weird relationship between me and God where it's like, yes, I love him. When I thought of God in a good way, what I thought of was Jesus. When I thought of God in a bad way, what I thought of was Yahweh. Like Yahweh was the guy, and I didn't have the words at the time to describe it, but Yahweh was the guy that I was scared of and did not like. Jesus I liked. I thought that he was chill. I liked his philosophy on love and acceptance and turning the other cheek and whatnot. And I did not like and appreciate Yahweh's call to violence, frankly. Like he was seemingly always doing bad things and tricking people and manipulating people, and I didn't like that. So it just confused me. For a long time, I just kind of lived with these two kind of conflicting ideas of God in my head and just accepted it. I got to high school. I went to St. Xavier High School in Cincinnati. It's a Jesuit school, so it's not Catholic, I don't think. It's Jesuit. It's like a branch of Christianity. I think it's a branch of Protestantism, but I'm not sure.
Jesuits are fully Catholic. They
Never
work
mind then.
outside of the most structure of like the Diocese of Cincinnati has like their churches. The Jesuits operate like directly under the Pope in a certain sense. And so they're very Catholic. Most Catholics hate them, which is say most conservative Catholics hate them and accuse them of not being Catholic. They
Yeah.
are technically still very Catholic and dare I argue, a much better version of it than a lot of churches out there.
And it's funny because like that's where I started to open up to other ideas and understand that like, being gay maybe it's not a sin, maybe it's okay to explore my feminine side a little bit, or maybe I'm not eternally damned if I don't go to church every Sunday, just like things like that. Exaggerating a little bit, but you get my point.
How conservative was the Catholicism you were raised in? Like my family growing up, we went to church most weekends, but we never really talked about gay marriage, like never came up at church. And so it wasn't exactly a liberal version of Catholicism, but it wasn't a particularly political one. Versus I know some families, church is something they only do a few times a year, but they may still hold very conservative views of like, and God says we can't vote for gay marriage, even though we haven't been to church in like months at this point. How political, for lack of a better term, was the Catholicism you were raised with?
Well, that's complicated because I remember most of it, the religious stuff from my dad. He's kind of an artsy fartsy guy. He was kind of the stay-at-home dad too. So like and mom was the worker. So he kind of had an untraditional role of caretaker. And I feel like that always made him kind of an enigma in my head because he's like this bastion of masculinity and Catholicism and traditional masculine roles and whatnot. But then at the same time, he's like being the stay-at-home dad. So I'm just like, where does that make sense? I don't know. But he never was like a hateful guy. I don't think that he has hate in his heart. I do think that he is confused and misunderstands people a lot. I think that he is very smart in some ways, very dumb in others. So he was always listening to like Rush Limbaugh, Fox News, Tucker Carlson, Bill, what's his fuck, you know, like those people, Bill O'Reilly. So those types. Yeah, those types. Glenn Beck. I got a Glenn Beck book for my birthday when I was like 12. That's how bad it was. But what's funny is it was never like, it was tied to religion, but like not all the time. Like the global warming thing. My dad was real big on like, it's fake, you know, and there's no global warming. Look around you. And every time it would snow, I'd be like, how's that global warming for you? The liberals, take that. You know, he's like one of those types. So I think that he's conservative as a result of being Catholic, but I think in his brain, it's the slightest bit disconnected from each other. I had a grandma, sorry, she's passed. And she was a cloistered nun. After my grandpa passed when my dad was 12, so I never met him, my grandma became a cloistered nun after everybody moved out. And she lived in Nebraska, and every once in a while she would come to visit. She was just like the nicest, sweetest, most generous, forgiving person that I've ever met. Wouldn't hurt a fly. Not like those mean nuns that you see in the schools, you know? And it's funny because
people with rulers.
Exactly. Never. Like she would never raise a hand to anybody. He was just the gentlest soul. It's funny because my dad, I think there's a part of him that there's a big part of him that wants to be more like that, and he just can't do it. Like he worships the ground that my grandmother walked on, but he just can't bring himself to be that type of person that is just endlessly charitable, loving, forgiving because of his political ideology. So I think there's two conflicting ideals in Catholicism. There's love and accept everybody, which is on one side, and that's the part that my grandma loved to embody. And then there's follow God's rule, which is the other side. And those two don't always play nice. So my dad's trapped somewhere in the middle there. I think that my grandma was very much more on the love and accept everybody side. And so as far as that pertains to conservative ideals, it made a very confusing worldview for my dad and for myself, because I thought to myself, well, okay, we're supposed to love and accept gay people, for instance. How do I do that while telling them they don't have the same rights as me? You know, like it's always that conflict.
So it sounds kind of like your dad was both conservative and Catholic. Not that those two things were the exact same, because I know some Catholics that like all they read are church documents and like conservative Catholic influencers, and their conservatism is very much based out of religion, versus there's some people who are sort of conservatively religious, but then also are listening to the Bill O'Reillys and Rush Limbaughs of the world that sort of smuggle in a lot of conservative ideas with religious talk. But it sounds like he wasn't necessarily getting climate change talking points from the Sunday sermon at the Catholic Church.
Right. That was more the abortion part, but that aside, like that honestly though, that just to stick on that, like abortion is his big issue. Like that is the reason that he cannot let any of this go.
Fascinating, because where I grew up and before I went down the rad trad rabbit hole, I don't think I even knew what abortion was growing up and was never talked about in a church context. And then it seems like the early 2010s is when, at least in Minnesota where I grew up, like Catholic churches started really talking about the issue. But it sounds like at least in Ohio, churches, or specifically Catholic churches, had been talking about abortion in sermons and stuff while you were growing up.
Very infrequently, but it did happen. Yes. I remember usually it was some kind of comment at the very end, you know, where it's like during the sermon, it was like, this is why we respect life, and this is why we love each other, and by the way, abortion's wrong. Like it was kind of like that energy.
And so you'd mentioned it was starting to go to a Jesuit school, that you were open to other ideas and considering other alternatives, which I've heard a lot from people when they go to, like, a lot of major universities are ran by Jesuits or Jesuit high schools that form you in how to think well about the world. Sometimes those conservative beliefs or dogmatic beliefs become less convincing. Tell me a little bit about how Jesuit schooling opened your mind to other ideas and what role that may or may not have played in your own deconstruction or thinking about religion.
When I was a freshman, we learned about the Bible. And I think the first thing that struck me was one of the first things we learned is the Bible is not all facts. You know, like there is mythology in the Bible, mythology, and there's legend. And then I think at the New Testament is where they started to say that's where all the factual stuff took place. Whatever, sure. The acknowledgement that there were things in the Bible that simply were not factual was huge for me, because I had never heard that before. I had heard that from people, but I'd never heard that from an official religious institution. You know, like there are things in the Bible that simply are not true. This didn't happen. Adam and Eve did not happen. It is a story that we made up, and it has value, but it's not that it's factual. And that was really interesting to me. So then that was like the first gateway that kind of opened my brain up to new ideas that I didn't consider before. We learned about a guy named Saint Ignatius of Loyola, and I didn't think about him much at the time, but I want to go back and study him again, because as I remember, let me look him up real quick. Saint Ignatius of Loyola. Do you know anything about him?
Yeah, he's the founder of the Jesuits, lost like part of his leg or was involved in battles and lost something with a cannonball. And in the middle of his time in the hospital, had this big sort of like spiritual awakening. And a lot of his work is on the spiritual exercises, which are like imagining yourself in all of these Bible studies, where you're not just like praying to God, you're like imagining that you're really there at the Nativity. And he sort of founded this Jesuit religious order as big on education, big on missionary work. And they've been operating for the past 500 years as sort of the vanguard of the church in terms of education and pushing the boundaries on science and understanding the modern world, which is why a lot of conservative Catholics don't like the Jesuits, because they do talk to the outside world and they do value education and not just religious indoctrination per se. And even Pope Francis, may he rest in peace, was a Jesuit, much to the chagrin of many conservatives.
Yes, so he was a missionary. He traveled around a lot, talked to people, and got to know people. I think that that involvement with all of these different groups of people is what made him special. You know, like he really did try to just open himself up to others and have them open themselves up to him, and he tried to understand them and meet them on their own. And so I haven't really put this into these kind of words yet with Ignatius specifically, but I think that he is a big, he is kind of a big inspiration for me, because that's what I'm trying to do right now, is open myself up to other people and their ideas and understand that everybody is just trying to get along in the world as best they can. And I think that he embodied that, and I think that's why the Jesuits, as you know, him as the founder, I think that's why the Jesuits just tend to be more progressive, because they get that, you know, they are people, if that makes sense. Like they make themselves servants unto others. I think that's a special thing. I think that he was the first one who kind of, like, I really liked him when I learned about him. I need to go back and revisit that, because he kind of opened my mind up to that idea of like just opening yourself up to people and having them open themselves up to you. I like that a lot.
I think so much of religious fundamentalism relies on like not seeing the outside world and not getting outside of your own bubble. Yeah, what I've loved about the Jesuits is they're still very Catholic. They believe all the things the church teaches, but they can't be as fundamentalist because they work in the mission fields. They see the world and they see life stories that contradict like a very myopic view of the world. But they're not afraid of the outside world, which I think is so much of what Pope Francis brought to his pontificate, is meeting people that he might have said, you know, they might break church teaching, but he wasn't scared of the outside world. He wasn't afraid of talking to other religion. And he was still very Catholic, right? He was the Pope. As the question goes, like, is the Pope Catholic? Very much so. But he wasn't quite as fundamentalist, and he was much more balanced about everything. And so I think even my own deconstruction was getting to see more of the world and not just like the crazy, kooky Latin mass circles that I belonged in. And so returning to your story, so you're going to this Jesuit schooling. Was that for high school or for college?
High school. I did not go to St. Xavier College.
And so through high school, would you have still used the label of Catholic?
Yes. I think until college, I went to the University of Cincinnati for my biology undergraduate. And until then, I was using the label Catholic, yes. I had some different ideas.
What about college? How do you reevaluate sort of that Catholic label? Was it just getting out of the house? Was it confronting other ideas? Tell me about why you stopped using that label of Catholic while going to college.
Well, it's hard to pinpoint. I know that I was part of a specific interest group, and this group of trans people were very accepting of me, despite the fact that I was conservative. I got along well with them, and we had a specific shared interest, and we got along with that shared interest. You know, I asked them a lot of questions, and they sometimes would, you know, they would take offense to some of them, but, you know, I was a dumbass not child, but I was basically a child at like 18, 19. And then when I was in college, you know, you see a lot of people of different races and of different gender orientations. And, you know, like college is like the place to go if you want to meet like the blue-haired, non-binary, SJW, nose ring. Those people tended to be the most fun, you know, like they were just the people to be around for the most part. You just saw this all the time. You're inundating yourself with it. And then I met this girl who I will not name, and she became, through some circumstances, my girlfriend. She was very nice. She had some issues, but so did I, obviously. It came to a point where we were having unprotected sex, and I got her pregnant. This was like the last pillar to topple for me. Very difficult, because I was basically coming to terms with the fact that I can either A, force this woman, who I know for a fact is pro-abortion and stated to me that she would get an abortion if she got pregnant, force her somehow to give birth to this child and then need to raise this child somehow without a college degree or while getting my college degree, or I help her pay for the abortion. You know, that was my option. So I went with the latter. And frankly, it didn't even take me that much thought. She brought me to dinner once. I could tell something was up. I didn't know what. And she brought me to dinner, basically tried to break up with me because she knew how I would take it. I basically had to force it out of her that she was pregnant. So I hugged her. I told her, we're going to take care of you. We're going to take care of you. Because in that moment, all I was thinking was, like, I love her too much. Like, I have to do whatever she needs me to do. And that was what took priority. And so from there, long story short, I went through a lot of trauma after that. We broke up shortly after that because she threatened to tell my parents. It was a whole deal. It was a whole mess. And I wasn't perfect in that relationship either. I did a lot of shitty things, but, potato, potato, it is what it is. I went through this kind of metamorphosis of like, now I have to reckon with the fact that I did this thing somehow. Like, I need to figure out how to reckon with the fact that I may have possibly killed my own child. And that's not an easy thing to deal with. As I see it now, I did what I had to do at the time because I didn't see it as a child. If I had truly and honestly seen that fetus as my child, there is no way in hell that I would have gone through with that. Period. So, how can I force others to see it as the child that I couldn't? And that was the last domino to fall. After that, my socialist sister decided to indoctrinate me into socialism, and that was the end of that.
I remember when I was very Catholic and would have described myself as pro-life. I think the abortion debates are really simple if you're 14 and going to the Latin Mass and very Catholic, or if you're a stable married Catholic couple. That's like, if we did have another child, look, we do have a bunch of extra savings. I think in my own life of growing up and seeing how complicated these decisions around having kids and bringing them into the world, and that like it turns out the lie that I sort of believed or was led to believe when I was Catholic is that, like a 4-week old fetus is like basically fully formed, but just like shrunk down. Because I know a lot of pro-life people always have the like tiny babies of like each size. It
Yeah.
turns out that yeah, early stage is just not, it's not recognizable, it's not independent, it's not anything. And I just don't understand the Catholic position now on the other side of like a one cell zygote, exact same thing as a fully formed human. It's like it's not even like intuitive on top of leading to a bunch of political ramifications. It's just not intuitive at the end of the day.
I empathize with everybody these days. We could get down that rabbit hole. The radical empathy arc. For lack of better ways to put it, I empathize more with people who see that cutoff at like 20 weeks or something, the second trimester, than I do with like the single-celled people. But I will say, having come from that, you have to like believe in the soul, right? It basically comes down to that every time. You can twist yourself in pretzel knots to say like, oh, science justifies this, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's a human life. It's a human life. Even if it's a person, it doesn't matter. Like, at the end of the day, even if it has a soul, honestly, like you can still argue this, even thinking that it has a soul. At the end of the day, what you have is a foreign body attaching itself to yours. And so you should be allowed to have that foreign body removed, regardless of if it has a soul or whatever. And I have yet to meet a single person who can give me a good argument against that.
Especially when you bifurcate the moral and the legal question, right? Because it's not even about like the nuances of when does, let's say, a fetus have rights, but more about even then the government. You have to hit an even higher barrier with the government to be the ones forcing people. Where I can see, I think even a lot of secular couples into later stages in a pregnancy do recognize that as their child, and they can see it kicking, and would probably be against like randomly getting an abortion. So it's not even like a moral question. It's more about the legal question that I always like to reframe debates around. It's that, is the government an appropriate apparatus to force people to have this foreign body in them? And we know every time any amount of abortion bans pass, then doctors are afraid to provide healthcare, that women who are fully formed and adults are passing away and not accessing adequate care, that the government sucks on any sort of legislation, on top of the already not great moral argument, which is, yeah, in up until 22 weeks, it's not viable, it's unrecognizable, it's clearly not conscious. So there's a debate there. And then I think once you throw the government on top, is like, Man, I just don't know how we get to like abortion bans being a reasonable thing for the government to
I don't
do.
know. I mean, if you think that abortion is baby murder, you will find a way to justify outlawing it. You know what I mean? Like, anything that you can do to stop it at that point is justified because you think babies are being murdered. So, what else is there to say? You have to convince them that babies aren't being murdered first. It's
And
true.
so you're no longer using this Catholic label, you're going down the socialist rabbit hole with your sister. What did leaving Catholicism look like for you? For some people, it's ignore it, essentially like get away from it, and that was my own journey for a few years. For some people, it's a much more like thinking through every single issue one by one. Tell me what Catholic deconstruction looked like for you.
I don't know when exactly it happened. There was a tumultuous period after my breakup where I was in a very deep depression. Not only because of the breakup, but the abortion as well added to that. And that was my first relationship, and my heart and soul were so attached to this girl that I just kind of lost my mind for a while. I was in a very negative emotional state. So I think that sometime during this period of darkness, as I'm stumbling around, I kind of just like I had to let go of something. Something was holding me back. And I think part of it, at least, was this idea that the omnipotent God is watching and judging. And so, like, I just kind of, during that period, at some point, it just kind of left. The more that I thought about these issues, the more that I learned about the world and how it works, and the more that I came to detest some of these views and the people who held them, the further away that I drifted from religion. And I became an atheist at some point. I was agnostic. I called myself agnostic because it's like, what's agnosticism? Oh, it means you're not sure, so you're in the middle. But then I was like, okay, I'm an agnostic atheist. Like at some point I finally said, yes, I'm an agnostic atheist. Funny enough, that's not how I identify now, but if you'd like to get into that, we can. As an agnostic atheist, I reached that conclusion because I don't know what's out there. I don't know what happens after death. I don't know if there's some guy pulling the strings. We can't know. That's the agnostic part. The atheist part of me told me there's no evidence for God, right? That we don't have what we need to prove that or disprove, especially that God is there or isn't there. And so you may as well just say, as the saying goes, flying spaghetti monster. That's kind of where my brain was for a while. I still largely believe that stuff. It's funny because I've recently had like this epiphany of sorts where like I think that there is value to religion. It's not a coincidence that like basically every society on the planet has some kind of spiritual guiding force to them. Every culture is attuned to some kind of spiritual belief. That's a wild coincidence, don't you think?
I'm excited to dive into that. Before we move there, I wanted to quickly stop on, if you're comfortable sharing, about when you started using that atheist or agnostic label. Had you talked to your parents at all? Was there pushback from people around you for no longer being Catholic? Or was it like, I mean, he's out of the house, he can believe whatever he wants?
It's mostly my parents. I was a bit of a loner in college, so I didn't have a whole lot of friends, and the ones that I did have were through my girlfriend at the time. So I didn't really get a whole lot of pushback from like friends or anything. It was just my family. It was mostly my dad, my mom kind of, but mostly my dad, who just was worried about my eternal soul or whatever. Just like trying to tell me, well, you need to go back to church. Kids don't do enough church these days, and you're all atheist, and that's why you all are the way you are, and blah, 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 like just old man yelling at cloud type stuff. He was never like super pissed off about it, but he's just worried about me. I can't fault him for that. I guess looking back, it was very annoying at the time, and I kind of resented him for a long time for it because, at the end of the day, it's like, I think I was justified. If my dad thinks that the God he worships is going to send me to hell for having done nothing wrong, then how can I say that he loves me? And like, how can I say my dad loves me? And therefore, how can I love my dad? And that's kind of where my head was at for a long time. It wasn't like he was viscerally lashing back at me, but it was more like this subconscious, I don't know if I can ever have a normal relationship with him type of thing.
I walk with a lot of people who are leaving religion or even joining religion or coming out and navigating these conversations with their parents. And I've always said that there's a difference between like understanding and then feeling like you have to deal with something, where I think it is perfectly understandable whether it's a child leaving religion. If you do believe that they're at risk of burning alive for billions of years, to like understand that, I think is integral to know where your parents are coming from. At the same time, it doesn't mean you have to deal with it per se. And same thing with coming out, where I know a lot of people will talk about their parents have to like grieve this version of their kid that they lost in a certain sense, or this vision that they've had for their kid, or have all these beliefs, and to like understand and be gentle and not force someone to agree with you. And then also the value of boundaries is quite helpful in those conversations. So it sounds like sort of with your dad, it wasn't easy for him to accept and it was sort of understandable where he was coming from. Has that gotten better over the years if you're comfortable sharing?
I think it has. And also, like, you know, I recently, as I said, I don't identify as atheist anymore. So when I told him that, he was like, oh, hallelujah. You know, like, I'm not Catholic either. I'm not Christian, but you know, we can get into that if you want. But before that point, yes, like he came to accept it and leave it aside and just trust that at some point I would come back around, I guess. He swore up and down every time it came up, John, you'll learn when you're older. You'll learn when you have kids, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's kind of how he came to peace with it, where it's like, he just told himself, he'll get over it. It's a phase. He'll get over it. Pretty long phase, but you know.
Was your sort of new epiphany and thoughts on no longer using the atheist label before you started getting into sort of streaming in politics, or has that been a much more recent thing?
Not to go too far back, but I did start YouTube as a Let's Player when I was in college. I have horrible videos on my channel. Years and years later, I picked it back up because, well, I was inspired by Hassan Piker. I liked Hassan a lot. I watched him a lot, and I decided I want to start streaming just like that guy, you know? And so I started with video game streams because that was what I did. And streaming's different from making videos because, like, you're actually in front of an audience, you're actually talking to people while you, like, it's nice for the ADHD brain. That's why a lot of us are streamers. It's immediate gratification, right? I started editing my own videos, uploading them to YouTube. I got an editor to start uploading for me. Obviously I switched over to politics at some point before the editing. Just started covering news articles and, you know, going over my opinions on certain videos and such. What was the original question again? I'm sorry.
You've stopped using the label atheist. Did that happen before or after getting into the past sort of like 3-ish years that you've talked about of doing more political streaming and having some momentum?
That I stopped using the label atheist. So that was actually very recent. That's like a couple months ago. I had a lot of fights with my family this year, and I was a very angry, bitter, resentful person for most of my life. Earlier this year, I feel like I had kind of an awakening of sorts, and I'm simply not angry anymore. I don't get angry. I get heated sometimes, but it's just because I'm frustrated at some people for not being charitable to my position or understanding where I'm coming from while I'm sitting there trying to understand them as much as I can. I was so angry at my family, especially when the Charlie Kirk thing came up. I was like riffing on it online, as some people were doing. The first joke I actually posted was, I think it was like the only really joke I posted was, as soon as it happened, boy, politics sure can be a pain in the neck, can it? And I put that on my YouTube. And I'm not proud of that. I'm really not. I deleted it, but only because, like, my brother texted me, was like, that is not cool. You need to get rid of that. And I was like, okay, fine. Well, actually, I saw the video, and then I deleted it. I thought he just got grazed. Like, he died. He wasn't pronounced dead at that point yet. So I was like, oh, this is probably just another Donald Trump thing. No, that mother died. That was bad. So I deleted it. I started posting Charlie Kirk quotes instead. And I do stand by that. I think that we need to remember Charlie Kirk for the guy he was. But that got my family pissed off at me too. And this was not the first political argument that we had gotten into recently. So at this point, I was finally just like, you know what? F it. I'm done with all of you. I don't care what you think anymore. I'm going to post what I want and you're going to like it. Even my mom was like, she texted me. She's like, you're going to stop posting what you're posting online or I'm going to stop helping you with school. And I was like, okay, bet, fine. I understand, Mom. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And that was the first time I felt like I had confidence enough to say no to my parents and not capitulate to my family. Like, I truly had that freedom. And then there were some other elements that came in. Like, I had a friend who I'm still not talking to. We had a falling out, and I said some things that I frankly don't feel bad about. I shouldn't have said them, but like as soon as I was done off the phone with them, I was like, I don't feel bad about any of that. Like, that needed to be said. So I was starting to develop this confidence in myself, right? Like this self-esteem that I hadn't had before. And I was just kind of doing my own thing. I would go on TikTok debates, and I would start like yelling at people, right? Like TikTok debates. You want to talk about some of the dumbest motherfuckers on this planet? Go to some TikTok debate panels.
It's always a place where people are so open to change their mind, and the dialogues on TikTok debates are always, moving arguments forward. I have my own thoughts on TikTok debates, and I've just never seen a good one before. Like, random people, I just feel like isn't the move. But
guess what? It was the move for St. Ignatius of Loyola, wasn't it?
Hit him on TikTok back in the day would have been, oh, I could see him, St. Ignatius of Loyola, like, we have good reason to believe in the Catholic Church request, but it's all a bunch of like medieval peasants. I could see that working well.
But also like it's kind of true, right? Like I threw myself into random groups of strangers, the dumbest of the dumb, the lowest IQ of the low, like just dumb as bricks. Just threw myself into the pile and just saw what happened, right? And it was during this period where I'm like listening to people. I'm trying to be charitable to their positions, but I'm also getting uppity and I'm screaming and I'm yelling and I'm hooting and hollering. You know, I think the last time I really remember being angry, it was this transphobe. And it was, I called her a bitch, right? You're a dumb bitch. And then they dropped me from the call. At this point, I had been kind of reflecting on like how I was coming off in these debates, and I did not feel good about that. Like, I said exactly what was on my mind, and I didn't like it. I did not like how I sounded right there. I was doing pretty good for most of it. And I was being, like, I was very annoying, too. Like, I was like this, I was in the chat like, let me up, let me up, let me up, let me up. It was really annoying, but I just did what I felt like doing, and that was it. And what I felt like doing right there was calling her a bitch, knowing that I would get dropped. And I got dropped, and I decided that did not feel good. I didn't like that. And so from there, I was nicer. You know, I started really trying to listen to people and hear out why they think the things that they do. And this was especially helpful because I'm getting my psychiatric nurse practitioner license. So like I'm going into psych care. And so it's important for me to be able to do that, like understand where people are coming from and meet them where they're at. And so I started to embody this idea. It made me realize the thing that is going to unite this country and this world and bring us all together is empathy. Like, we need to all understand that the person sitting across from us, no matter how much they disagree with us or what they disagree with us on, does not think that they are the bad guy in their own story. And this goes all the way down to Hitler. Like the worst of the worst people, 99.99 times out of 100, do not think that they're the bad guy. Or if they do, they have some excuse for it. And that basically makes them the good guy. So everybody thinks they're the good guy in their own story. No exceptions. So if that's the case, we're all the good guy, right? All of us. In our own heads. So then why are we not on the same page? If good things don't happen as a result of an action that you take, you should learn from that and change your perspective. But people aren't doing that right now. Why not?
Very Catholic belief of yours. It's still something that I've used to this day. There's this idea that humans can only pursue a perceived or actual good, which even in the Catholic understanding of people who've, let's say, left religion, is to say that like there is some sort of perceived good. It's not that they are aware of things and actively want to usher in Satan's kingdom, or people who are sinning. It's not that they woke up one day and decided to be evil and are aware of it, but somehow the evil one, the adversary, has convinced people or has duped people into pursuing a perceived good. And I mean, you could see it a lot in even talking about toxic relationships, where there are things that are absolutely unacceptable to do. And it's a lot of the times because we're all scared, broken human beings dealing with our own trauma at the end of the day. And that's something that I've gotten pushback on my own platform of doing so many debates with some very crazy conservative Catholics, where people want me to hop on a soapbox. People want me to go for the slam dunk. Like I've heard some crazy, ridiculous things.
The owns.
And in a
Epic
certain sense,
own.
yeah, epic owns where there's so many moments where I could jump and pile on. But gosh, it's like, do I want to change minds to get people to think better? Or do I want to get clicks? And those aren't always the same thing. Is I think
No.
one thing that I've
Well,
learned from content.
you can still get clicks while changing people's minds. I've lost subscribers, but the reason that I've lost subscribers is because people think I'm being too nice to bigots. Most people understand my project, and they get that what I'm trying to do is different and not blood sports. People are fucking tired of the blood sports. So that's why I say, like, it is not only possible, but you want to be the genuine guy. Like, it's the Joe Rogan of the left, right? People have been saying, like, oh, the left doesn't need a Joe Rogan. Yes, we do. We need many Joe Rogans. Because what does Joe Rogan do better than anything else?
So
It's
the
one
crazy
word,
people
starts
for
with an
3
L.
hours at a time.
Well, yeah. It's one word, starts with an L. He listens.
Listen.
He is a extraordinarily good listener. Almost none better. And that's why people like him so much, and that's why he blew up the way he did, is because he listens. And he demonstrates that listening, because what does he do right after he listens? He changes his entire worldview to what you just said. There's no better listener on this planet than Joe Rogan. And that's why he is where he's at. The left doesn't just need a Joe Rogan. We need many. We need people to listen, and that doesn't mean we need to change our views like Joe Rogan does. Where he lapses is that he listens, and then Hassan Piker describes him as a chameleon. You know, he changes completely to match the perspective of the other person. He empathizes too well in some instances. He's way too good at it. So like he gets lost in the sauce. What we need to do is we need to empathize and understand where other people are coming from and listen to them, but then not compromise our values like Joe Rogan does. We can be that rock. We can be the people who say, no, I hear you. I'm listening to you, and I know that you're not coming from a bad place, but here's why you're wrong. We're going to walk through it step by step. We're going to shove reality in your face slowly but surely, and you can do one of three things. There are three options people are presented with when faced with an uncomfortable truth. Okay. You can accept it and change your worldview, and that's what we're hoping for. You can challenge it because you think they're wrong, or you can walk away and you can be delusional. That's what it is. At the end of the day, if you present somebody with all the facts and they don't believe you, they are a sick, delusional person. And I don't think that most people are that. They just need time to figure their shit out, you know?
I love that framework. I spent years as a Catholic apologist reading like all of the books on how to convince everyone of Catholicism and all of the social issues. And I've changed my mind on the sort of like end positions, but I still think there's so much that I keep of my approach to conversations from Catholic apologetics, like you're talking about, where people are sort of people are pursuing perceived goodness. People have the best intentions, and we can still hold them responsible. Like I don't think any Catholic apologist is going to go, oh, we understand the other side, and so we're not going to do anything. It's to say that like we understand the other side, and we can reach across some of these boundaries and sort of give people information to change their mind. And also in a very Catholic understanding of the world that like people need accompaniment, and for people to be pastoral. I was recently talking to a friend who's from Ohio of all places, and we were down on this trip, and he knows what I believe. I tend to keep like what I actually believe quite close to my chest in real life, very contrary to the sort of the platform that I run. And he was wanting to talk about trans issues. And my first thought was like, oh, conservative Christian from rural Ohio. He's all of 20. If he were 40, like I might hold him more responsible from his views, but to say like, oh, and this is probably his background, and like, can I listen, not change my mind, but can I figure out where he's coming from and not expect him to change on the dot? There's a Catholic understanding of being pastoral, which is like, it takes time to change your mind. It takes time to be presented with new information, and that sometimes making somebody change on the spot immediately makes them clam up more. And especially when it's like, and you're dumb, and you're misinformed, and you want to hurt people,
They get defensive.
they get defensive because we don't want to accept those labels. So, and I wonder if you've received the same pushback that sometimes I do when I say something like that, which is, but people on the other side are enacting actual harm. And I think two things can be true at once, a very both and Catholic approach, which is we can understand where someone's coming from, and also, like you said, not compromise, where I have like a lot of conservative Catholics know me and work with me, but I've never moderated on trans issues. I've never thrown trans folks under the bus. I've never like split the difference on big issues. But yet there's a huge chunk of conservative Catholics who listen to me and who have had their minds changed. So I've received that pushback of like, well, and if you're nice, people are going to be harmed in the process. Is that something you've heard? And how do you sort of respond to that criticism?
So the last part was, if you're nice, you're going to be harmed in the process.
To understand, let's say, somebody who's bigoted, that if we understand and we slow our roll, the bigots are enacting real harm currently. And so we can't compromise because we need to protect people. I sort of have my own thoughts in reply to that. But if you got in that pushback, was like, we can't compromise,
Yes.
we can't be nice, otherwise people are going to be harmed.
Oh, 1000%. And I used to have the same criticism, not even early, like 4 or 5 months ago. This is a very recent change for me, but I think it's a big one. And I know it came very fast for a lot of people, but they need to understand that I'm not going back. I am not that guy who's going to sit on my soapbox and yell bigot at people anymore, because that's not what they need. And that's not going to change anything unless you kill them. Like literally, that's what it would take, is to kill them. They would change more. Like, they'd be dead at least, right? Like, yelling bigot at them, it didn't change me. You know what changed me? Some nice TLC from trans people. Okay. Like, that's what it took. So, like, all I'm trying to do, right? My dad taught me a great lesson, and I said this earlier to somebody else. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I can sit on my soapbox all day and talk about how trans rights are important, which they are, and you're a bigot if you don't use people's preferred pronouns, which you are. But like, and so you hear how I'm like kind of mockingly saying this, but I'm not compromising. Like I still believe all of those things. I just need to package it in such a way that it is consumable to my political opponent, because I don't want to kill them. So like, the only other option is to change them, because otherwise it's war. That's how it always works throughout history. And I don't want war. So what's the alternative? We talk it out, And the only way people are going to listen to me is if they know that I care about them. The best way to get people to know that you care about them is to get them to like you. Be a likable, nice, easygoing guy that is just here to listen to what you have to say and respond genuinely and honestly. And I can do that without compromising my values. I can do that without taking bullshit. I take bullshit less these days than I ever have in my life. Like, I do not put up with dumb bullshit anymore. If you are doing that to me, if you are with me, I will call you out. It's give no grief, take no shit. So I don't like this idea that like I'm some softy now who gets pushed over easily by bigots, because that's not the case. If you're bullshitting me, I'm going to call you a bullshitter. But at the same time, I save that tactic for when you are actually bullshitting me, because there are some people that, like one I talked to earlier. Her name's Mary, the Mary Chew, you know, and she's a trans person, she's a trans woman, but she doesn't even call herself a trans woman. She says she's a man still. You know, she's like she took issue when I called her a Blair White type, but she kind of is. So, but she's genuine, you know, like she believes everything that she is saying, and she thinks that she's coming from a good place. She's not bullshitting me. So I was nice to her the entire time.
Earlier this year, I was on the Michael Knowles Surrounded, and I know a number of the cast members. There's sort of discussion afterwards among the cast of, well, we should have been meaner to Michael Knowles because nobody changes their mind on these big issues. And I sort of piped up and I was like, I changed my mind on these issues. Like I used to unironically listen to Michael Knowles. In high school, I was listening to Ben Shapiro almost every day. When I was a conservative Catholic, I was protesting abortion clinics, and I was standing against gay marriage, and had some of the shittiest beliefs on planet Earth, and was very open about them. In fact, everyone at my like 4,000 person high school know me as like the weird Catholic guy still to this day, until I sort of made this platform.
Someone
And
said
so when I heard
Michael.
this person talking about how we needed to have been meaner to Michael Knowles because nobody changed their mind, I was like, I'm proof. And now I'm not just having left or gone down the moderate rabbit hole. Like I am one of the LGBT activists on the Michael Knowles Surrounded for Jubilee. Like I went from listening to this guy to now publicly debating him. And there's a bunch of things happening behind the scenes with Knowles. He keeps talking about me publicly, and is
Really?
he's in like Ben Shapiro's
We're among
Knowles
celebrities.
has the Yes No Show, and he had Ben Shapiro on and was naming me from the Jubilee debate. He's in a big talk with Dave Ramsey, has talked about specifically me. And then he'd emailed me after the episode to tell me that I should be Catholic again. And then once I said, awesome, bring me on to your show, like would love to have a conversation. Now he's been ghosting me for months, even though he keeps talking
Ah,
about me, which I find very funny, dare I say, cowardly to some extent, to
very
be talking
cowardly.
about someone and then also be running from him. But hopefully that might happen. But all to say that, like, I don't think I could ever get to the point of wanting to dunk on people and assuming the worst of people, because I've been through that. And I know that it is sometimes somebody who can listen to your bullshit and go, yeah, no, but I still love you. Because I think so many conservative beliefs thrive on the persecution complex, that it relies on how everyone's ruining our lives
They're
and everyone's
victims.
trying to destroy Christianity. And when it's just like, yeah,
Eternal
man, that's just
victimhood.
like not how it works.
And you're not going to get through to a victim by telling them they're actually the bad guy and other people are the victims. Never gonna happen. There was somebody who said Michael no less. I thought that was funny. But also, like,
Yeah.
what's so funny is like you reminded me of a story. It's a short one. You know, I was a Reddit debater back in the day, a keyboard warrior on Reddit. Well, for conservatives, and I was replying to somebody about how like I was in a car accident when I was like 8 years old, and I was a Reddit keyboard warrior, and I was talking about how I was in a car accident when I was 8. Crazy car accident. Like, car rolled 6 times. All 5 children were in the car with my mom, who was pregnant with another one. My dad was the only person out in the car, and boy howdy did he have a day. So I mean, we all did, but my dad, I can't imagine being in his position. Like, that must be toe curling, to say the least. Put some white hairs on your head. So anyway, I was talking about this on Reddit, and I said, by the grace of God, by some miracle, we all lived. And not only did we all live, but we weren't horribly maimed. I had some glass in my hand. My brother broke a rib. Those were the worst injuries. And also my mom's, the baby survived. My little brother Evan. There he is. I was saying, like, through the grace of God this happened. And this person said, no, it was through the grace of the car designers. Like, they designed a very sturdy car for you. And what's so funny is I told this person, I think I was like 14 at the time, and I revealed my age because they like kind of clocked me. And they said, okay, well, you will come to understand when you are older. Like just give us some time. You'll see the world for what it is. You'll come back and understand what this actually was. And, it's just funny because he was right. If he's out there somewhere, he was right. So if you're listening to this and that sounds familiar, hi, that was me.
Crazy coincidence for
Congratulations,
that person.
GG.
Prophecy has been foretold. Yeah, I found so many of my own thoughts on religion are informed by wanting to see everyone as the most reasonable that they can be. I do use the term atheist, and actually I'm doing a longer video on like what precisely I mean by that. I use it more as a shortcut because of the conservative Catholics that I debate that like need everything to be black or white. And so
It
I
gets to
use
the point.
atheist for sort of, because they're always like, is this someone like lying about their beliefs? I was like, yeah, I'll use the more extreme label. I think in conversations everyone comes to take away my atheist card by the end of the conversation, but I think some of my own thoughts are, I don't think that religious people are unreasonable. I don't think that if they just thought about the issue they would change their mind, and at the same time I don't think that every other religion, as people are more or less reasonable by being Hindu versus being Christian, or being a conservative Catholic versus a liberal Catholic. I found atheism as sort of a shortcut of a term, but I think that we're all searching for something transcendent. We're trying to make meaning of the world. I always joke about how much of Jordan Peterson's philosophy I steal from his like pre-2010s, like going conservative and going off the rabbit hole. His older works, like Maps of Meaning, before he got political and famous off of transphobia, but much of his older belief is to say that like religion is a meaning-making apparatus. We're all trying to make meaning of the world. And so it's not that religions can be inherently right or wrong, but are rather expressions of the values that we have, which I think if your approach to religion is a conservative or a dogmatic Catholic, that sort of means atheism. But I think most people, and even many Christians that I know, will say that I'm still Christian at the end of the day. But I've just found it to say, like, I don't know a world in which I can say everyone in the world is unreasonable except for myself, or that the only people who thought about any issue on any side, the only people who've really thought about it are people that agree with me. Which isn't to say that I think that I'm wrong or that I'm not confident in what I have to say, but I want to have a worldview in which I can see the most number of people as the most reasonable they can be. And so, yeah, I could go on a much longer rant
No,
about that, but
please.
I feel like that
I agree
allows
completely.
conversations, and I think it also allows a much more relaxed approach to conversations where, as somebody who's an atheist, as somebody who is very progressive, I don't have to like shake people or to like choke them out or like manhandle a conversation into them being reasonable. If I can present the ideas and the stories, that allows them to change their mind on their own, because I think that most people are reasonable. Now, I do talk to some people that have very unreasonable beliefs in general, but that's sort of the nature of having a platform debating conservative Catholics. But I think most people who are Catholic in real life, or religious in real life, or even conservative in real life, or on any side of an issue, if they can just see the information that has been held from them, they will change their minds. But like online with conservative personalities, like they're not going to. And so I think a lot of people on the left or left-wing streaming will go, and conservatives in general won't change their mind. But it's like, man, we're seeing like the worst possible people because they're political influencers, versus I think most people are misinformed rather than know that they're misinformed and still hold to it. Political influencers, different story, but I think the average person follows much more along the misinformed with good intentions, even if those end results may still harm people that we need to guard against. But I don't think they're enacting these policies to cause specifically harm.
Well, I'll even go a step further. I think even the grifters themselves aren't doing that. I don't think
Mhm.
Michael Knowles is purposefully and knowingly making the world a worse place to live, not even for his own benefit. I think that he's twisted himself in pretzel knots, mentally speaking, to justify what he's doing. But at the end of the day, he's justifying it. Michael Knowles does not think that Michael Knowles is the bad guy. You know, he is, but the bad guy never thinks they're the bad guy, right? So, like, for a long time, I thought that, like, the purpose of debate was to try to sway the audience. And it is. But I think you're just solving the symptom, right? Like, you're trying to, like, cure the symptom, not the cause. So, like, if we're really, really going to reach people, like, truly and honestly, we need to start going after some of these influencers and being charitable to them and their positions and changing their minds. And that's what I'm in the process of trying to do right now. This is a good segue. I am partnered with Platinum Politics right now, and I do debates in here like this all the time. There's this guy named Remnant 777. A lot of people are upset with me right now because Remnant 777 sucks. And I basically made nice with him, and he's been promoted by people like Tectone, you know, like not small names. Like, he is larger than me by a fair bit. He and I had beef for a while, but now we don't. We are on decent terms. And this is a guy, mind you, that has said some pretty racist things. So, like, people don't like that. Like, I lost audience members specifically because of that. I've seen comments saying that I'm being nice to fascists, you know? I'm sorry, but that's where it's at. That's the root cause, okay? And now, Remnant doesn't think that I'm that bad of a guy. That's a great start in my book. And I've compromised
I
zero of my positions. None. I still believe exactly the same things that I did, and I still shill exactly the same messages to my audience, and he thinks that I'm a nice guy. Great
I
start.
always wish I could show people the work that I do offline and off the record with Catholic influencers and officials, where the bulk of my work is online doing public content. And I mean, it's weird going from nobody really knowing who I am, and I've never really posted on social media, even like my personal Instagram, I think has like 4 total posts. And then this year sort of being thrust into now 20 million people have like seen my face. And it's like sort of weird getting recognized in public. But people sort of see what I do publicly and think that's all to it. When the number of conversations where I have talked to these Catholic influencers because I've built trust, not by compromising, not by changing ideals, but it's incredible what extending an olive branch is like. When you sort of have these disagreements and go, awesome, let's hop onto a live stream and sort of, instead of launching videos back and forth, what if we talk this out? Or I've had a number of conservative Catholics staying at my house who work in the media world. And it's not that I said, awesome, I'm going to moderate on my positions or expect you to change your mind when you're staying here and we're having all of these discussions. But that's what allows for change. When our fight or flight response is activated, when people feel like they're in a fight, our brain capacity literally goes down and our ability to see multiple options on the table goes down. And so it's much harder to change your mind because you have entrenched yourself in it versus much more free-flowing discussions. Ones where charity is extended allows people to think. In the number of times that I've either hopped on debates on very conservative Catholic political groups channels or had them on mine, where once they get onto a stream, they go, oh, you're very different than I thought. And I go, no, there's nothing different between my streams and my actual positions in videos. It's that you're experiencing some amount of cognitive dissonance that I might have an intelligent position. And I think that the same charity must be extended the opposite direction, where policies are much more nuanced, positions are much more nuanced, and so much different offline and in real life than terminally online politics, where we do have to realize that everything can be a dog whistle. And the number of times in person where I've heard somebody use what is a dog whistle online, and you go, tell me about that, and they mean something entirely different, and they've just sort of like picked up these vestigial talking points, and not that they are the most terrible person ever on the internet. I think is a great way to start those discussions.
Yeah, I got to jump off of here in just a minute, but I do want to end off on this. I have something that is called the mind cave theory, and I would love to go over that with you sometime. But basically, I view all of society as sort of a cave, and we are all living in this cave together. Right now, a lot of people are stumbling around in the dark, unsure of where to go or what to do, and if you have a bunch of people who are blind in the dark, stumbling around, clawing, punching, kicking, screaming, they're going to hit each other. And, you know, certain people are going to find out that some people hurt worse than others, and they're going to be more scared of those people. Like, does this make sense? Like, that's how society is right now. That's how the world is right now. There are a bunch of people stumbling around in a dark cave, just reaching out for anything to grab onto and make sense of what's happening. And in the process, they end up hurting each other. And they don't even realize that they're really doing it. So what I'm trying to do is bring the flashlight. Bring the flashlight, show them that they have been stumbling around in the dark and hurting people, show them the damage they've caused, and then show them the path forward. And, you know, you were saying earlier, like, you present people with that, like, people who like you, right? And they think you're smart, and then you say something that they disagree with, and they're forced to face an uncomfortable reality. You're shining the light in their face. The light burns. When you suddenly shine a bright light in somebody's face, you're gonna be like, what the fuck? Like, that hurts. Ow. And you need to adjust to it. You know, you need to spend some time in that light and let yourself adjust to it. And the more that you keep shining that light on them, and they're, you know, if you're shining the light on them and they're comfortable with you, they know that you wouldn't hurt them, they're gonna be more comfortable with that light, you know? Then once they're comfortable in that light and they can accept it and understand what has, you know, the reality of their situation, you can get them to help you, or you can just help them proceed. They can navigate the cave in the way that they see fit. Let's put it that way. So that's kind of how I view, you know, what's happening politically in our world right now.
Well, how fitting for a ex-Catholic interview to end with an allusion to Plato. Plato's Cave is a perfect note to wrap up on. It has been a blast having you on. Was it 2 or 3 years ago that you were on Jubilee? I think it was the first time that I had seen your stuff. I have a very, very good long-term cartoon lefty. Yeah. I have way too good of a long-term memory online. And so I've seen a number of things over the years, was glad to finally sit down and hear so many of the recent developments that you've been up to when it comes to Catholicism, religion, and navigating all of these tough topics. For people that are listening then on my podcast, where can they see more of what you're up to and your work, social media, any of that jazz?
Absolutely. So just first off, my manager just joined the chat, so I have to make sure that I show Platinum Politics. I love you, Mace. Platinum Politics is a great server. We got a lot of people here of a lot of different political persuasions. Obviously, no Nazis or anything like that. You know, just people of all different political backgrounds that are not dangerous or violent. Please come join us. We have, hello, baby. We have all kinds of conversations here. This is Winry, by the way. Winry wanted to shill as well. But yeah, Platinum Politics is great. I'm a representative of them now, and this is where I do all of my debates and discussions. So if anybody has anything that they'd like to talk about at all, you know, just talking, debating, otherwise, DM me. I'm Alec Gunter, ALEC GUNTER on Discord. Discord, or you can email me, the Alecator, TheAlececator @gmail.com. You can find me at youtube.com/AlecGunterTTV. I am uploading a lot of videos lately. I'm going to try to upload some more. My editor just quit their full-time job to be my full-time editor, which is great. We're going to be pumping out some content, so definitely come check me out and join the Radical Empathy cult.
But it's been a blast having you on. I am excited to see where you go from here. It's been an honor having you on.
All right, same here. I had a lot of fun, and I think you're a really brilliant guy. I would love to talk more.
Hi, thanks so much for watching and making it to the end of the video. I just wanted to let you all know that I love and appreciate everybody in my community, whether you can support me financially or just by liking, commenting, and sharing my videos. It helps way more than you know. That being said, I do want to give a very special thanks to my tier 4 subs, which would be Space Timid and Hot Take Andy. And thanks so much to my monetary subscribers from any of the tiered subs, or anybody who gives me money in any form, including going to my Patreon shop, donating money to me directly. It all helps way more than you know. If you do decide to help me financially, you can get some really cool perks like early access to content, exclusive access to censored videos, also some really cool badges next to your name. Even if you can't afford a monetary subscription, just watching, sharing, and commenting on my content helps way more than you know. Thanks again, and I will see you all in the next video.